Good afternoon, everyone. I feel like we should ask you all to come up to the front tables because we're a little feeling far away from our audience here. So thank you for joining us. I know it's right after lunch. As I said, some people may be making their way down the hall. I'd like to welcome everyone. My name is Lisa Blair Davis, and I lead Human Resources for Johnson & Johnson Medtech. So some of you may have heard Ashley speak earlier during these sessions. We have about 70,000 employees of Johnson & Johnson's 120,000 in the Medtech group and about 30 billion of J&J's total sales. So we run as our own segment. A lot of people know J&J through our pharma and our recently divested consumer business, but I started my career in Medtech at J&J and have been back in my role here in Medtech for the last 5 years and absolutely love Medtech. So happy to be here, joined with my panelists today, and maybe we'll just go down and do a quick introduction. Willie, you want to start?
Sure. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Willie Grant. I lead Global Human Resources for Cooper Surgical. I've been in role for a year. I've been in MedTech for a year. I've been in industries adjacent, so a lot of time in pharma and human health and animal health and consumer products, but only a year or so in MedTech and med device.
Yeah, we're going to get into that about how we get new people into MedTech. So we're going to tell Willie to tell a story a little bit. So thank you, Willie. Christine.
Good afternoon. I'm Christine McCauley, and I lead Human Resources for Edwards Life Sciences. And I have been at Edwards for 24 years. I always feel really old when I say that, till I follow it up with, and I've been in the industry for more than 35, so you can do the math. Yeah. But for the last 12 years, I've served as the head of HR, and it's been an exciting time as the company's grown. And so we look forward to the discussion here, and we definitely want to learn, Willie, how we bring people like you into our industry sooner. So,
thank you. And Annie.
Well, it is a pleasure to be here. I'm Annie Heath. I run diversity for Stryker, and I've also been at Stryker 24 years, but I always say I started when I was 10. So, still quite young.
I will adopt that line.
But as you know, Stryker is a multi-billion-dollar organization with about 50,000 people, and I feel very fortunate to have been a part of this organization. I have a little bit of a unique career path in that 20 years of my experience was actually in the supply chain operations world, and then moved over to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So have a good kind of landscape of Stryker, which has been fantastic.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining me here today. And Christine, don't feel bad. I have 30 years at J&J, so I feel even older. And we share a lot of things in common. So two CEOs of the companies that are here I used to work with. So we'll talk a little bit about what that means for our industry, how we swap around talent, how talent moves across our industry. So some of you may have joined last night. There was a women's executive network, which had a very full room and a lot of good takeaways. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that just to set the stage. And then this morning we had MedTech Color, where we had a keynote speaker from Edwards, fantastic, telling her story and just sharing about kind of what it means to be an advocate for talent. And then we just had a lunch with Jenny, and Jenny talked a lot about kind of what does it mean for talent in the marketplace and skills, and what are we doing to open up industries for new talent. So we're going to talk a lot about that today, but our main focus really is about retention today. And I would love to encourage audience participation. We'll have a chance not just for questions, but some ideas where we can share with each other as well. So just a couple of things I wanted to note. So AvaMed recently did a survey in 2023. This was the second time we had done it. In 2021 was the first survey. Deloitte was the partners. And there was some key takeaways about women increasing. So 40% of the companies now have 50% gender parity, which is progress from 2021. However, we're seeing that there's slight increase at the leadership and that there's still more opportunities. We're going to talk a little bit about the broken rung. I know that was also come out with the survey that the Lean In and McKinsey did. You guys may have seen this. It just got released last week. Some good information in there. And we're going to talk a little bit about also as well as what we're doing for entry-level diverse talent, because we see that there's huge opportunity, especially in sales and commercial roles in our industry, to welcome more diverse talent into that. But, what we often hear is it's hard to break into medtech. You don't have medtech experience, or, we don't talk about how skills are transferable from one group to another. So I'd love to hear from a few of you just how you came in to find yourselves in a career in medtech. And Willie, since you're the most recent one joining medtech, we'll start with you. So tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, I answered a call from a recruiter. I wish I had something more elaborate, but it was literally, he called me, he said, hey, I've got an opportunity for Cooper, and I knew Cooper Vision, so Cooper Companies, we have 2 divisions, Cooper Vision with contact lenses, and then Cooper Surgical, which is women's health, and I said, sure, let's talk. And the mission really for Cooper Surgical is really what drove me to the company. And then the more you learn about the industry and the company, is the more you get excited about it. And when you get excited about it, you can tell your story. And you had touched a little bit on people were saying you need med tech experience, and I always say you only have it once you get it, right? We didn't all come out of the womb learning, knowing med tech, right? We had to learn that. And so I think that's a myth that we can break down as we go forward, but it really is around how do we tell our story around med tech being an industry of choice.
Yeah, thank you so much. Please share a little bit more about how you guys both found your way into med tech.
So I had previously, I'd say, industry hopped in my career. I'd been in financial services. I had been in aerospace in a major downturn. I had been in semiconductor, which was up and down and up and down. And I actually was on maternity leave and had no intention of going back to work. And I was going to be a stay-at-home mom. And the search guy called me. And I don't know why I answered the phone, because I was on this maternity leave and I had a 3-week-old and a 2.5-year-old. But I answered the phone, and the job was interesting enough. And this was way back in the day where you didn't have everything on a device. So I said, yeah, fax the spec to my husband. He can bring it home. I'll let you know if I'm interested. I was very sleep deprived. And, but at the time it was Baxter Healthcare, and what I did not know was Baxter was going to be spinning the cardiovascular group, which was to be Edwards, and they were looking for someone to really build their HR organization, some of the specialty functions. And so it was a really hand-in-glove fit role for me. But it definitely, I had to retool my thinking that I was not going to be a stay-at-home mom, which I think people who knew me best were like, yeah, how long is this going to work? Because I love my kids, so do anything for them. But I also really love to be busy and work and make a difference in the world. So I landed in this role primarily because of the people. I knew several people from grad school and from the small community in Orange County. And they worked at Baxter, loved it. So that was what drew me. And obviously the opportunity to start with a new company. So throughout my process, then it got revealed to me that they would be spinning this organization. And so this was going to be corporate. That's a role that I've always enjoyed and thought, hey, this could be great. When I started, did I ever really think I'd be there 24 years later? I didn't. But it's been incredible. And we've done so many things at the company. It's grown in so many different ways that it's been a continual career opportunity. And so I've never really been interested in leaving. But the piece that I think is so special about MedTech is the patient impact that you have. And so, my company just prior was Texas Instruments, which is a great company, well-run, well-managed, treats employees right. Every kid has a calculator because TI exists. And there was a point where that was really important because every kid did not have an iPhone. And yet, as important as that work was when I was there, it pales in comparison to what we do every single day and know that we come to work and patients live and spend time with their family. So.
And were you already in Orange County when you got that call, or did you have to move? Yeah, so that's another draw, I'm sure, staying in Orange County.
It is a hard sell.
Yeah, there's a lot of med tech opportunities in Orange County as we find ourselves here in Anaheim today, so it keeps people here too. So thank you for sharing. And Annie?
Yeah, there's similar threads to our stories. It is about who you know, and it is being comfortable with the people. I had no idea what Stryker was. I had never heard of it. And then once you see it, you can't unsee it. Then you like go to the hospital and you're like, oh, Stryker's there, Stryker's there. Oh, that's what Stryker is. But I had no idea what that was. And I honestly had every intention of going into sales. So I had, all these different plans for my life. And the recruiter was one of my friends from college. And she said, you got to try this. I want you to come through. I want you to interview. And I'm like, wow, this is nothing that I really wanted to do. But she's like, just trust me, just try it. And I said, okay, I'll go through the interview process. And I interviewed with operations, which is not even a thing that was on my radar. I told her that was the worst class that I took in college. And she was like, just trust me, it's great. And I went through and I met all these amazing people. And I thought, okay, this is amazing. I'm going to give this a try. And both her and I are still there. And still best of friends. But I feel incredibly grateful that I had found somebody who understood that the mission was going to be important to me. And that's something that, when I was, first looking for jobs, I wasn't totally thinking about at that time, 24 years ago. So felt grateful to have a friend who kind of introduced me into this world.
Thank you so much. I mentioned earlier about talent swapping in our industry, and the recent I&D survey that AvaMed did, it showed that there was a 21% increase with women, but we also think that that's a lot of swapping that happened because the total pie didn't increase that much. And I think that's one of the things that as we've been working together under the leadership of Jen and others coming together through AvaMed convening us is how do we grow our industry and talent and how do we attract? So we heard a little bit about each of your stories and your journeys to getting into MedTech. When we get to the audience participation and questions, please share if you have some ideas that you think we should be doing as an industry of how we grow the talent pool. How do we create more awareness? We talk a lot about this challenge that we have. Like you may have a neighbor or you may have someone in your family or maybe someone in your family is part of the healthcare industry and then you learn about med device or med tech, but it's not something that kids in school are kind of exploring. My son is in middle school right now and they're doing this tech exploration kind of careers, and he had this worksheet of all these different careers. I'm like, wow, there's just some cool stuff. I'm in HR, I should be knowing about some of those careers, but I'm like, how do we get MedTech into that middle school curriculum so that these kids can be learning about that? And how do we tell our story about math and engineering and science and those skills that are in real demand that could benefit our industry? So I'd love to hear any thoughts that anyone on the panel has about how we do that, and then please also welcome some participation from the mics here in the room if you have some ideas.
I'm happy to start because I feel like, just echoing a lot of what you're saying. I mean, especially when you're younger, you get attracted to these roles that you're familiar with. I want to be a teacher. I want to be a nurse. I want, because I've had experiences and exposure. And so you have this, group of talent that is thinking about what they know and what they see. And if we don't get increased exposure, we're never going to grow this base in med device. So we started a coalition within our headquarters in Kalamazoo, Michigan, that is a pretty diverse community, what we call Career Right Here. And it is trying to think about how do we expose this talent. We had about 300 students come in from high school, middle school, and actually just get to play with our products, get to use our products. I mean, we, especially in our endoscopy business where you're, doing the surgery, looking at a screen, it's just like video games, kids. You can put this to good use. And so how do we continue? This is just on a very small scale. We have the power to align as an industry to think about how do we get this exposure and get people excited about these opportunities that are out there, because I think we can all agree all of our missions are admirable. And you think about these next generations coming up, that's so important to them, that they are impacting patients and lives. And so, how do we expand our exposure to more talent out there so that they can see that, hey, there is phenomenal careers in this space. And so I think it's a huge opportunity for us. Obviously, we don't totally have the answer, but I think us coming together and having these conversations is going to help.
I think moving up the food chain is an important aspect because we also have been part of an Orange County coalition of employers who have really taken on an opportunity to embrace high schoolers. And Historically, all of us have done college internships, and those have been very successful. But it's like, how do you grab someone's interest even earlier than when they're at college and they're already kind of making career decisions? And so the last 2 summers, we've had high schoolers in, and at first, my team was like, wait, what do we do with high schoolers for 6 weeks? Like, seriously? What can they do? And so we really had to think about how you create an experience for them. And it's really about exposure. We really didn't expect them to do anything much for us. It was more about helping them understand and get exposure to all the different career opportunities in Medtech, as well as the industry, and of course us as a company. But it was really for a broader purpose. So I think that's something that as employers, if we can all step forward and be willing to engage with a younger audience and think about how those programs work. And now it sounds like several of us are doing them. So if you might be a smaller organization or have less resources but be interested, I'd be like, don't reinvent the wheel. Reach out and let us share a playbook, because if we can engage more folks earlier, these younger kids with these bright minds, I think we really can move the needle.
Yeah, absolutely. And Willie, I'll pass along to all the recruiters that they should be calling people outside of the medtech industry, right? Because that's how we got you, right?
Exactly.
Take the call from the recruiters, right? But I do think that is something that each one of us in our seats, how are we influencing, how are we having those conversations with the hiring managers, with our partners that may be the recruiters, to say, we're open to somebody's skills that may be adjacent to the industry that we're in, that we could bring together. Last night at the Women's Executive Network, we talked about entry-level sales and how that is one of the areas that's been hardest to really make an impact in terms of increasing diversity and expanding that pool of talent. And a couple times it was mentioned from the stage, the National Sales Network, so NSN. And if your companies aren't familiar with that, I would encourage you to have partnerships with National Sales Network and go there prepared to make offers. This isn't something that is just about networking. People are there to look for jobs. And as an employer, if you're there and can make the connection and hire people for those roles right away, we need to find those entry points so we can keep expanding this pie.
I think the other kind of variations on the theme, right? It's really about investing. So when you go to the NSN, and so for Cooper, this is our second year at NSN, and it's interesting because it's, well, how many people did we hire? How many people did we hire? Well, they don't know who we were last year, right? And so it's about building and investing. And it's okay if you don't get a hire year 1. It might be okay you don't get a hire year 2. But they see you there year 3, guess what? You'll get a hire. But also, it's about the development, right? The NSN is about development. So now think about MedColor, MedTech. How do we turn that NSN model into something for us, right? And how do we create, and maybe if we have, I apologize, how do we create that environment where we bring talent together, we develop that talent so that we're not swapping talent between ourselves, but we're developing that talent, we're growing it. We can steal it from pharma, right, from NSN, but let's not steal it from ourselves. So.
Yeah, I have an advantage because I got a whole pharma group that I could take talent from too. So that's kind of a nice bonus that we have at J&J. But we've talked a lot about attracting people into medtech, but we also want to talk about retaining people in medtech. So I'd love to hear any of your highlights of what you're doing at your organizations. I know, Christine, we talked just a little bit before the start of this session about what you're doing with your leaders to make sure that inclusive environment, that people feel welcomed, so the development, as you talked about, Willie, is there so that we can retain the people that we do have. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, how many times have we heard the phrase that people will join a company and leave a leader? So we look at a leader as really the linchpin to, I guess, leverage our session title, to what an employee's experience is. And we all can talk about medtech and the special and unique things, but it's the leader and that direct team environment that really kind of pulls it all into what it means every single day for an employee. And so when we really got super serious about our diversity, inclusion, and belonging initiative, which was several years ago, one of the things that we tried to do is actually engage the leaders. We did not want it to be the next HR initiative. Of course, HR was a lot of the kind of machine behind what was going on, but at the end of the day, if it wasn't important to the leaders and they didn't understand why we should be taking this on, it was just going to be HR cycling through, hey, everybody check the box. And so part of what we did is talk to our leaders about why is this important to our company? Why is this important to our industry? And at that time, our industry had really dismal statistics. Like, everybody looked around and said, why are we struggling? It's like, well, look at our industry. We're kind of representative of that. So we have to solve the problem for ourselves and our industry. And with our leaders, we talked about what many companies talk about. Two things always surfaced when you said, why are you investing in DI&B? And it was like, wow, have you seen all the studies? If you have a more diverse talent pool, you have better results. It's like, that's out there over and over. And then, of course, you have the famous old, oh, it's the right thing to do. Of course we should all do this because it's the right thing to do. And, those are both really good reasons, not to minimize those. But for us, in an innovation space, that the core of innovation is diversity of thought. And so we really rallied our leaders around the need to fuel our innovation strategy with diversity of thought. And that was only going to come from diverse people and bringing them all together to really mobilize. So we got a lot of energy from early on. And then it's been, how do we keep our leaders engaged over and over? So it wasn't a one and done, hey, we did this 6, 7, 8 years ago, we're done, because I don't think we're ever going to be done. And so our most recent initiative that our team has taken on, which has been very eye-opening and, to be honest, a little bit scary, when they came and said, we would like to take underrepresented employee populations, small group, 10 or 12 people, with 2 senior leaders, and have, real deal, no holds barred talk about what is their experience at our company. And I'm thinking, okay, so I'm going to get my peers to sign up for this, walking in a room, not know what exactly they're going to hear, and have an underrepresented employee population say, this is what it feels like to me when I show up here, not what it feels like to you who's sitting there, in a senior position. Those have been really valuable, meaningful, and insightful conversations that we've handled this year. And we've kind of been cycling through. And I look at it, and I've been around DI&B for a long time, and I was amazed when I walked out of the session. I met with our African heritage employees, how much insight I had. Things that they were telling me, I was like, wow, that isn't in my realm of consciousness. I didn't understand. And it has caused me to turn around and infuse those learnings and insights into other conversations to kind of pay it forward more broadly. So we felt like it was maybe a bit of a scary, risky situation. But anytime you can bring people together to have open, honest, transparent conversation and really share experiences, we can make progress. And so we're on that journey.
I agree completely. I don't know how many of you have seen teachers often will say to their students, what's one thing you wish I knew about you? And the things that these students share with the teachers, that the teachers are like, wow, that makes me be able to connect. And what are we all doing as employers to really get underneath and understand what are our employees walking around with? One thing that we did at J&J that I'll highlight is we had employees record their voice and say some things that they wish we knew. And then in leadership team meetings, we would play those back. So I just would have leaders sit in the room and kind of close their eyes or just be in silent and listen to voices, because it felt a lot more impactful than just hearing it be repeated from the HR leader or in a slide deck that was summarizing, those points of view. So just a few things that you could think about to really think about what are we doing in our environments and at the office to make sure, because if we're able to attract and we get over some of the hurdles that we're all navigating through, it's our responsibility now to retain that talent. And I can see in our organization when that talent drops off and when they're kind of what I call the stickiness within J&J, right? It's bigger than just the one leader that they work for. It's also kind of part of the culture. And that first 3 years is the hardest. And I think it's even harder when we bring in senior leaders, because there's these things that I call invisible walls, or these kind of glass walls that people will walk into that they didn't see was there. And some of those cultural things that talent will tell me, like, I didn't know I was about ready to like bang my head on that glass wall, right? And then that's our job to make sure that environment is better. So thank you so much for sharing that, Christine. Annie, tell us a little bit about what Stryker's doing on this topic.
Yeah, I mean, retention is like a major focus for us right now, and I would tell you, like, I personally called a bunch of people who had left Stryker who were high potential, and basically want to understand more than what was, check marked on the exit survey, because I think it's easy to kind of check mark these things or kind of say these things in the exit survey. There's always so much more that goes on, underneath all that. And there were two things that were apparent to me, and it actually really aligns to a Bain study that came out on fabric of belonging. One, that the lack of representation really matters. It is really easy to tell these stories that I will never get to a certain spot because I don't see somebody like me. And I think as leaders, we have to be so conscious and be over prescriptive in these conversations. I heard over and over of, like, I just didn't know what my career path was. I didn't know. I didn't think I could get there. And so, sometimes I think our leaders take this, kind of peanut butter approach on developing talent, and it is just not like that. We really have to think about the individuals, and we really have to think about the stories that they will tell themselves because of what they see and because of what their experiences are. And so we have to combat that and be far more deliberate in talking about what we see next for you, and how do we talk about not only your development, but also your career progression. I think there's so much confusion around development and career progression that we may be talking about your development, but you've never talked about my next role, so I don't feel like I was ever being developed. And so how do we have these? We need to have both conversations. They're both different. They are both very important. That there is this true understanding of I am being developed, and whether in my role or my growth, and then I also see a career path for myself. So that was really important. And then the second finding out of those conversations was lack of transparent feedback. When we think about what drives an inclusive culture, feedback is so important. And in general, our leaders are just not great at feedback. And, so when we would have employees potentially go through, some of the employees that I talked to who had left, they had gone through our internal mobility process and they didn't get the job. And to be perfectly honest, they didn't really understand why. And feedback's a two-way street. Whether the person heard it, I don't know. Whether someone who was trying to give them the feedback said it, I don't know. So to me, it's a little bit of both. We have to be open to hearing and listening the feedback. We also have to be giving transparent feedback and not be afraid to give that feedback. I think, you look at all the studies and, we don't give as much feedback as we should to women or people of color. We don't give constructive feedback. We don't give really, strategically thought out, how do you grow your career? So from our perspective, what we're really focused on is those two things around how do we upskill our managers better to provide transparent feedback, and then how do we continue these career conversations coupled with development and kind of marrying both of them, because that's what keeps people at the organization when they feel like they're truly valued, like this feedback of this is what you're doing well, this is what you're not doing well, here's how we can address these things. That keeps someone feeling very valued in the organization, and that's going to keep them there. And then if they can see that trajectory, they're also going to stay because they're excited about what's to come, versus picking up the phone from the recruiter to say, oh, well, here's this other great opportunity. Okay, well, I'm gonna jump on it because I don't know what that is in my current organization.
Yeah, I'd like to build upon that too. So for those of you who have read the recent release of the Lean In McKinsey study on women in the workplace, there was a whole section in there about women's ambition. And, don't confuse that women are ambitious. Yeah. It was very clear, like women are ambitious. So this tagline that women don't have ambition. But what the kind of next kind of click down was, what does that mean for hybrid work and remote work? And the survey was revealing that men felt that they were getting feedback in more direct terms to be developed, to be prepared for those roles, and that being in the office allowed that to happen more easily than being in a remote and hybrid. So you think about kind of flexibility that everyone's looking for, but if we're not in the office in the traditional sense, what does that mean for all of us as leaders, and how do we help prepare our leaders in the organization for that exact topic of the direct conversations, the feedback being heard and being received, but yet delivered in a way that someone can receive it and knowing that it's in their best interest. So I'd love to expand on any thoughts on that topic of kind of hybrid and remote, and then kind of what that additional challenge is going to be for us.
Yeah, for us, hybrid and remote actually has taken off exponentially over the last 12 months. And so what we're finding is that we are able to attract more talent when we are agnostic in terms of location. Now, there's close to my closest 30 friends, there's debate in the organization, like how agnostic do we want to be when it comes to location, right? But that's a story for a different day.
That's a different breakout.
Exactly. But what we're finding is that we are able to attract talent. We are promoting talent that are quote unquote fully remote as well, right? And so we're not seeing it in Cooper as much, where we're not hearing that, you know, I'm not being exposed, I'm not getting exposed, I'm not getting developed for our folks that are either remote or fully remote or or hybrid. So.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Christine?
So it is an ongoing internal dialogue at Edwards. We are a very high relationship culture. And, you know, we lived through COVID because we had to, being fully remote. And we worked really hard to get people back as soon as we could in pretty much every geography where it worked. We have about 80% of our employees who are what we consider on-site, which is 4 out of 5 days a week. And then the other 20-ish% are hybrid or remote. And our leaders really believe, and we have a lot of energy around being better together, and particularly for our innovation model, how people just spending that time that may not be, you know, structured, we're all together this 1 hour in this meeting on a certain day, but just throughout, and a continuous engagement factor. So it has been a bit of a challenge, because we have people who say, yeah, well, I'd love to join you guys, but I really don't want to come to the office at all. Or maybe I'm willing to come for 2 days. And right now we're kind of holding on our perspective. And we actually went through a process to identify by role, what roles do we think are completely, you know, location agnostic, and it's fine. And what roles does it really matter that we want people to be in person, and that energy of the teams coming together. So it was a big undertaking, but it allowed for a great dialogue between a leader and an employee on why and how we view their role. And to your point, being open, transparent, sharing the perspective, you know, it could be debated and discussed, but at least the conversation happened versus just some type of edict.
Yeah, I think, just to pile on this topic, I just think that we have to upskill our leaders to lead in this new world. You know, it's easy. It's some ways sometimes easier to just manage everyone when you're seeing them come into the office every day. I think we're always going to be in this world that there's going to be some level of virtual, some level of remote, and we have to upskill our leaders. I mean, and I know early on there was a lot of articles out there about being virtual kind of reduced some microaggressions and actually helped some of our diverse talent. Like even the raise hand function was helpful, because some people may not want to speak up in a meeting, but they felt comfortable pushing the raise hand function on Zoom or Teams, and, you know, felt more comfortable giving their input when they were in this, and didn't kind of experience some of the microaggressions that maybe they would have felt like walking into the conference room or whatever it was. So we have to think about, how do we provide quality feedback? How do we provide quality development experiences and upskill our managers to lead and navigate this new world? Because I don't think it's ever going to completely go away.
And develop the talent.
And develop the talent.
And develop the talent. I'd love to open it up to the audience here. So we have 2 mics. There's one here and one over here. If anyone wants to come up, questions, thoughts, suggestions about what we should be doing as an industry. We're kind of all in this together, figuring it out. So, and welcome any participation.
Looks like there's a couple. Go ahead.
Yeah.
There's a mic right here, right in front of you.
Yeah.
I was just going to, am I loud enough for everybody here? I just wanted to ask about the broken rung, because I think that was something that was brought up a lot in the session last night, but
Yeah.
wasn't really elucidated as far as where it happens and why.
Yeah. So does anyone want to take that, or I'd be happy to respond as well? Yeah, so I would encourage you to read the Women in the Workplace report that just came out from Lean In and McKinsey. So it just got released last week. But the concept is, as you're moving up the corporate ladder or the career ladder, the rung between being an entry level or professional hire to your first manager job is where the rung is broken. And that's where you see more men and less men advance more to that manager role. And they had some numbers, like for every 100 men, only 87 white women make it to that first level manager role. And if you continue down to intersectionality of different races and women, it becomes even less. So therefore, as you continue to go on up to the C-suite, you see that that first chance wasn't equal for all, or at least the data doesn't show that that chance was equal for all. So that's what we call the broken rung, that first step in the ladder to continuing to advance. And it was really called out more in line with, women, the perception that women don't have as much ambition. And they were saying, the women that were part of the study were saying, yes, they're ambitious, just the opportunities even for that first step weren't the same.
One of the things that we've went hard at, you talked about retraining our leaders, training our leaders on, was the concept of tapping people to say, hey, I think you could do this job. Because, and I'm not going to quote the statistics properly, but there's a long time ago Harvard study that talked about, a male and a female having the same level of competence for a role. And the male would absolutely raise their hand and say, I can do that. I've absolutely got it. You should pick me. Here's why I'm awesome for this job. And the female would say, yeah, I don't really think I qualify. I can't do this. I don't have that. The other piece, it doesn't quite fit my profile. So you should probably pick someone else. And it's the bottom line. And so we went after that with our leaders. We did some analysis on our internal job postings and who actually applied for jobs just of their own. And we trained our leaders that we need to look around at our population. And during our talent reviews, we forced the discussion, so to speak, on diversity successors. We said, okay, who are your successors for these jobs? If you don't have enough representation there, then who are the diversity successors? Even if you're telling me it's someone that's 7 or 8 or 9 years away, but you think they can do it, who are they? How far away are they? What are the key gaps that they have? And how do we get them those experiences? And by bringing those conversations to the CEO level talent review, where the C-suite is talking to the CEO and explaining their landscape, it really surfaced kind of where the gaps were, and we could look at it from an HR standpoint across the organization to understand what can we do programmatically to address those things, but then also holding our leaders accountable to actually take action with their diversity successors or diversity top movers and figure out how to develop them. And honestly, a big piece of it is them being aware of who's available, who is high potential, who has ambitions, interests, engaging them in those discussions, to your point, so they feel like somebody cares and is really focused on their development. And then when an opportunity comes available, we're not tapping somebody to say, hey, you're going to get this job, but to say, we think that you could be a viable candidate. And if nothing else, why don't you go through the process and see what you learn and gain some experience and visibility? And we've seen our internal placements. We track them very closely now, and it's we've seen the kind of proof in the pudding.
I think the other part of that is sponsorship, right? And having someone in the room that is not your mentor, but your sponsor. So they're saying, what about Annie? Right? Have you talked about Annie about this role? And often what I find is that the sponsorships are going to males, not for women or people of color. And so how do we ensure that there are sponsors in the room I was actually just having this conversation with one of my mentees about making sure there's a sponsor in the room for her when her boss isn't there, or it's not only her boss saying, you know, how wonderful this person is. You need another person in the room to kind of sponsor you.
I agree with that, and I talk about planting the seeds of sponsorship. It's not just in that moment where the decision needs to be made, but how months before that decision gets made, you're advocating to truly be sponsoring that person so that by the time the decision needs to be made, it's not like people are hearing about that talent for the first time. So you need to nurture that and kind of plant those seeds and water it and let it take off. You know, back to your point, Christine, about, you know, women not raising their hand or not applying for jobs unless they meet all the qualifications. It was just another reminder hearing Jenny talk about that today at lunch, how, you know, she said that was a pivotal point in her career, for those of you who heard her, and she says, I got to go home and talk to my husband, and then her husband, like, kind of reframed taking the risk for her, and how she got that feedback, don't do that again, you know, so, and a lot of times, you know, what are we doing to hold ourselves back from leaning in, or things seem too risky, and how do we kind of give that soft landing to some of the talent to be like, it's okay, you can get this job done, and we believe in you, and, you know, believe in our talent sometimes more than they believe in themselves, and that's about sponsorship and kind of paving the way. So thank you so much for asking that question. That kind of led into this. Was there another question on this side of the room, or was someone going to get up? Please. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind coming up to the mic so all can hear, that'd be great. Thank you for being brave to come on up to the microphone.
Hi, everyone. My name is Wesley Matingu. I'm here representing Edwards. Hi, Christine. Good to see you. So my question is with regards to upward mobility of diverse talent who have started the workforce like right out of college and who aspire to be in seniorship positions, because you see a lot of recruiting efforts to get a lot of younger talent that is diverse, but oftentimes when you look at the leadership and like the executive level, sometimes the diversity statistics don't reflect where I came in. And so my question for each of you in your very senior roles is, when you think of new diverse talent that really stands out or has had a lot of quick upward trajectory at the company, what are some key things about them? I can think of like mentorship, good networking skills, as well as just a great track record, but are there any other additional things that we should be considering when trying to further our career?
Well, thanks so much for bringing that question forward, and I'd love to hear from the panel on kind of what some ideas are. So thank you.
I think a couple of things that come to mind. One is exposure, right? So ensuring that that talent is getting the right and proper exposure for the decision makers, whether it's senior leaders, mid managers, hiring managers, and making sure that that talent has the exposure. And something else that I've taken on my career, and I heard someone say yesterday on the panel, is don't be afraid to take the tough assignment, right? Because believe in yourself that you have enough skills and experience to deliver on that tough assignment. And that just, it speaks volumes when you deliver and you say, I'll take it before anyone else. And people look and say, well, good luck to him, right? But then you deliver on it, it advances your career far more than you can ever imagine.
I agree with that, and I'd even go farther to say not even the tough assignment, but the really messy, awful situation where everybody's like, who is going to get that fixed? And it needs to be fixed. Because out of those, it's like, it's so bad, anything you do is probably going to make it better. And most people are like, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. And it's like, yeah, you actually should, because that's where you can show your creativity, your tenacity, so many things, and however you can improve it. And if it's something that's a real mess at the company, you're going to have executive sponsorship and people who really want to turn that situation around, so they're naturally going to rally around you. A second thing I look for is I love people who ask for feedback, and honestly ask for feedback, not just the old, hey, do you have any feedback for me? And it's so easy. Everybody's like, no, you're doing a great job. It's awesome. So I encourage people really to think about how you ask for feedback, and ask it in a way that it forces an answer. Hey, that last project that we worked on together, if I could have done one thing to be more effective as a team leader, what advice would you have for me? What would you suggest? because one, people love to give advice. So they will never just say nothing. They will tell you something. And if you ask a very pointed question, most people will respond. So I think people who are on their way up are seeking feedback all around, not just from leaders, but also from your peer group.
Yes.
Because as someone who's going to rise and aspire to be a leader of others, at some point you're going to lead the peer group that you were a part of. And that's a tough transition sometimes. And the more you can understand what they think of you and how you can connect with them in a different way to make that a more successful transition, that peer feedback, I think, is just like instrumental in development.
Absolutely. Anything else you would add?
Yeah, I mean, spot on. I think performance is your passport.
Yeah.
And I think we think we're just gonna put our head down, I'm going to work really hard, and the next thing's going to come. It's not. But it's your ticket to the dance. So you have to performance, but it is like 10% of like the next step, and it is visibility and exposure. And I totally agree with you. I look for peer feedback. I mean, I ran operations for 20 years, and I promoted the people that their peers were talking about. Like, I absolutely love working with this person. They are so great. I always want to partner with them. Like, they are like my buddy. They roll up their sleeves and get stuff done. I mean, they are just the one that's just connected. I think we lose sight sometimes of that peer relationship and just being able to connect with other people and get things done through others. And you see that naturally. And so like that exposure and experience with your peers, I think is the growth trajectory is limitless.
Thank you, Annie. Have someone else coming up, please.
I'd like to add to the suggestions. I'm with USC. I'm teaching the master's and PhD program. And what they decided at USC in that program is that when the people get into the workplace, they really don't have a lot of the social skills because they don't teach them in college, like how to talk to a decision maker. People go and talk to the boss and they get really nervous. And then they go on, and the boss doesn't want to hear it. They're so busy. So like how to talk to the boss, we teach that there. Another thing is people don't know how to write. Yes. They write on and on and on with stream of consciousness, and you don't want to read it.
Yes.
Right. So we teach them how you can write so that the CEO or the boss will read it. In terms of a meeting, they go to a meeting, and they want to be heard, but someone has more charisma than they have. So what happens at the meeting is they're quiet, or someone else takes credit for their ideas.
Yes.
So we teach them how to do that. So are you guys doing, we're doing this at the university level. Actually, we're doing it at FDA too. Are you guys doing anything like that in terms of teaching these skills?
Yeah, I'll add on to it because it was very interesting to me. We ran a program through two of our ERGs, which is our Latino ERG and our Hispanic or African ancestry ERG. And the 90% of the group there were first generation college, first generation in the workforce. And I think we've taken for granted that we assume some of these skills are coming in when you're coming into the workforce. And you do learn a little bit of it while you're in college, but if you're not exposed with your family or close friends, there's all these nuances and things that you're just not picking up on that could be inhibiting your career. And the other thing that I felt fascinating in this conversation is because of that talent that was first generation, they were so grateful for what they have that this concept of aspiration and communicating my aspiration felt very uncomfortable. That I am just so grateful for what I have today. So how do we coach them and say, it's okay. We want to talk about it. We want to have these conversations. Here's how you can talk about it. Here's how you can do it in a way that's comfortable to you. We also need to upskill our managers to enable more of those conversations and be a little bit more, provide a little bit more of that coaching when they see it, especially early on, to say, how do we stop this right when you're in early career? Because we can change it right away. It's much harder when you've been in your career a long time. So I think, we're thinking about it kind of a little bit of a two-pronged approach. How do we help our managers catch it right away and give them the right coaching? But then also, how do we provide some upskilling when it comes to presentation skills, writing skills? I mean, all of us are like on email all the time. If I have to scroll in an email, I won't read it. So please just can you just give me bottom line up front? How do we just give me the gist? So I think it's really important. It's absolutely things that we're focused on, and I love to hear that you guys are focusing on it at USC.
Great, yeah.
And one of the things we're doing through our one of our ERGs, our Women's Impact Network, is storytelling, right? And so, the young lady last night spoke of when she first came to J&J, and they were talking about decks, right? And you're like, what's a deck, right? Or you can create a deck or a slide deck and presentation, but if you're going to basically read the presentation, I don't need to be there. Just send me the presentation. So what we're trying to teach our up and kind of mid managers and up and comers is, how do you tell a story? Right? How do you use the slides as a prop to tell the story? Because senior executives listen to stories, they don't listen to slide decks, right? And so that's one of the things we're doing through one of our ERGs.
I'm so glad you're teaching this at the universities, because this isn't something that should all be on school, but it also needs to be in the workplace. I'll tell you a couple things we've learned is you want to make it safe for those individuals to be okay to learn, because they feel vulnerable, saying, I don't know these things. So, sometimes that works better with a buddy than it does a manager or someone that they feel like could help influence their career. So I would encourage all of you to have buddies and kind of go through that. And I also think it's important for leaders to show where we're still learning. And, like one of the things I'm working on right now, and Rachel's going to laugh when I say this, is smart brevity. So a book recently came out on smart brevity, back to all the emails that we got. I know a lot of our leaders, we're working on this too. Like, how do we get our communication really to the point? Because everyone's got all these hundreds of emails or texts or different, forums coming through to them, but we want messages to land on the organization. So how are we also making sure that we're modeling the right way to do that, so that the organization is learning from how we're communicating as well? By the way, I spent a couple of years in sales, and I want every HR person to go through sales, because you want to talk about getting your message across in the shortest amount of time. If I had to get that doctor from the OR door to the elevator, I had to get my message across in 15 seconds and make it really impactful. So, those are things that you put people through different roles. They have to learn those things, and it's something that we teach as well. So thank you for bringing that up. What's that? Exactly. So any more participation? Yeah, please.
Hi, so my name's Ellen Akiria. I've got a talent management agency.
Yeah.
And what I notice is that actually people, the number one reason why people move is because they feel that they've reached a ceiling. It's actually not for money often. And so we're pushing the message that career progression doesn't necessarily mean you have to leave a company. You can actually have lateral moves internally within a company, and that is also career progression.
Yes.
And that might mean you move departments. It might mean you stay in a department, but you go and work in France instead of the US, and you have a cultural experience. I was talking to one of my clients who then said, okay, but how do I make a business case for that? I'm in regulatory, I've invested in this particular person in my team in the US, but how am I going to make a business case to why I should send that person to another country to be part of another person's team? How do I make that business case like at a wider level? Do you have any advice for that?
I love to recognize talent exporters in our organization and highlight, part of our talent review process actually highlights any employees who have left. So each leader shows, here's how many people left my organization and went to, again, within Edwards, right? Left my organization and went to and took on a different role. And here's how many I imported that came from another organization, not under my leadership. And we talk about how have we facilitated that and how do we as a company encourage that. Because if I go back several years, and I'd say we're still on a journey, people were kind of protective. It was my talent. And we're really trying to break that down. And part of it is talking about it and recognizing it. So I think it's tough because it is very dependent on the leaders. And you really have to break through the leadership to be comfortable and confident to share their talent and recognize that it's a broad organizational resource, not individual organizations. Any other thoughts?
I would say the other part is the part of the business case is, why is it good for the business, right? So what is the business going to get from that person going over? sees or into another function, and what are they going to bring back, right? And so as you think about your business case, is what's good for the business, not necessarily only what's good for that employee. And so if you can sell that story, we could tell that story rather, then I think that helps as well.
Yeah, I think storytelling is so powerful, and I am a huge fan of leveraging storytelling. So I think it's finding examples in the organization that had that experience and how it developed their career, I think, and how it impacted the business. You know, like finding those stories in the organization and really emphasizing those can help build your business case.
Thank you. Any other? Well, here we go. Thank you.
Sure. Hi. Thanks so much for this panel. It's really insightful. I'm Rebecca Ream. I'm at Olympus Corporation of the Americas. And I hear you, Willie, you talked about sponsorship. There's been a lot of talk about mentorship and visibility. And one thing we've been talking about at Olympus a lot is, a mentorship program. But what I find as a barrier is these very robust mentorship programs. You have a 20-page booklet of how you match people, and it takes months, and it's supposed to last years. And I just think it's too much of a burden. So what I've been trying to do is micro-mentoring. So there's a great Harvard Business Review article about choosing a mentor for a short-term assignment, 1 or 2 30-minute sessions, and just getting that quick mentoring and then move on to the next person. And instead of just having one senior leader know that rising talent, have multiple people know them with a shorter investment that's a little more palatable.
Great idea. I mean, it's all back to kind of exposure, gaining the insights. How many of your leaders are we measuring? How much time are they spending with talent outside of their groups, their direct lines? I've seen some of our leaders do in their annual assessment, they will write up their self-evaluations, like how many different people that they've connected with in the organizations. And, that's also them advocating on behalf of talent. So I agree with you. It doesn't need to be 20 pages, and it doesn't need to be heavy, because anytime the process gets that complicated, people are like, no thanks, I don't have time for that. So how do we really simplify these things and make those connections very easy? Or even do, we call it like speed networking through table exercises, where talent will come in and the leaders kind of change tables and get to meet with 4 or 5 talent. And then from that 1 or 2 people, they have a more in-depth conversation later. So I think there's a lot of ideas that we could do to just make sure that those connections are happening throughout the organization.
I think we default all the time to mentorship programs. I think we think mentorship programs are the answer. I just don't think that they work as effective as we want them to. I mean, sometimes it's hit or miss. Sometimes the match can be great, and then sometimes it's fine, but it's not going to turn into a sponsorship. And I think we talked about kind of these big, hairy projects that are ugly. Like, I would rather throw someone on a big, hairy project and throw an exec sponsor on there for them to actually see how they work. Because, when you think about that sponsorship, like, you're putting your reputation on the line for somebody else. If I haven't seen you work, that's hard for me to do. And so, we really have to separate this mentorship sponsorship piece, and how do we create these sponsors? You really do have to see somebody work. And sometimes in those mentorship relationships, you don't really see that. You kind of get a feel for the person, but when you can see them working and working through, especially some big, hairy, crazy project or problem that they're trying to solve, that person's probably going to absolutely be an advocate for them. And so I think we have to be more thoughtful about that executive sponsorship, and how do we get people more visibility to the work.
Maybe I'll kind of flip it. One of the things that we've worked on is how do we get employees to own their own development, because it's always easy to look at the company and say, hey, what are you going to do for me? Or how are you going to help me? Or who's going to mentor me? Who's going to sponsor me? And so we have a tool that came, giving credit where credit is due, from one of our executive coaches, that is a career stakeholder analysis. And it's, fairly structured, but it's kind of quick and easy. You sit down and say, hey, in my role that I aspire to, who could be a stakeholder outside of my boss and direct chain of command? And you identify 3, 4, 5 people. And then, do you have a relationship with those people? If, given the opportunity, that person were asked about you, would they advocate for you? Not just would they accept you, but would they be an advocate? And if the answer is no, then how do you work with your boss to go and cultivate a relationship with that person, to be on a project with them. And sometimes it's not a full-time, like we're going to change your job, but it's something that we're working on, United Way across the company, or one of our other charitable efforts, or some process re-engineering, something that needs to happen. And you get an opportunity to be exposed to someone who you wouldn't naturally work with. And ideally, you have a great experience, just like what you talked about, and then that person becomes a stakeholder in your career and an advocate for you. So we've kind of put that on the employee side, and there are a couple steps for them, and then working in concert with their leaders, but we've had some really positive feedback on that.
Thank you, Christine. Well, we are coming at the end of our time here. I just wanted to go back to my panel in just a second, but thank you all for showing up, to be committed to this space, to investing in the talent that's part of our industry, and to leaning in to help make this industry evolve and become better. So thank you for your time today. But I'd like to just open it up, a passing kind of last thoughts that you want to leave with the audience as we wrap here. Annie, I'll go to you first.
Fantastic. Well, again, to echo Lisa, thank you for being here, and thank you for everything we're doing to elevate diversity, equity, and inclusion in all of our organizations. It's a tough job. It's a tough road. But I truly believe in it, and I believe in the results that it's going to drive for us as an industry. We have a very admirable mission, and it is something that is near and dear to my heart, and is something that I feel incredibly passionate about. And so the thing that I love about this space is I feel like our competition kind of gets left at the door, and we can come aligned together to figure out how do we elevate all of our innovation. We all have to elevate together, which means we need the best talent that is out there attracted to this industry, because all of us and our families are going to benefit from that. So I am very grateful to be a part of this industry, and also very, very grateful to be part of this function.
Well said. I kind of will jump on the rising tide lifts all boats, and that's what I think we have this opportunity to come together, whether we are HR professionals or leaders in the industry. Every one of us had a journey and got here, and you heard a few of our stories, and I'd love to have the time to hear everyone's story. But as we reflect on that and think about how can we actually pave the way and help others, I think we have a special and unique responsibility to do that as leaders. And if we can do that in a coordinated fashion, we can all help each other, help our industry, and ultimately, given what our industry does, we're really helping the world and helping so many more patients.
Absolutely.
I'll leave you all with three things. One, as we talked about retention, I think recruitment is an element of retention, right? So I think Annie had said, when you bring people in and they look up and they don't see anyone that looks like them, they say, why should I stay? So how do we ensure that we're recruiting the talent as a form of retention? The second thing is invest, right? Invest in recruiting talent, but also invest in talent that you have. And then the last piece, I'd say, we all need to be evangelists, right? We have great stories to tell. We have missions that really resonate. We do great things for the world and for society, and we should be out there telling our story, because can't no one tell it the way we can tell it. And so it is on us to be evangelists for our industry.
Absolutely. Well, some great insights and wisdom here shared by the panel, so thank you so much. And I just want to thank AvaMed and Jen and many others that are bringing us all together to hold hands on this, and it's a journey that we're all on, and I think many of us will be happy to dig into a little more detail if you want to, one-on-one, and also share some of our experiences as well if anyone has any other thoughts. But thank you for coming, and have a good rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.